having me here today. I'm not going to stand behind that thing. I don't really need that protection. But what I'm going to talk about is it's not really about the big infrastructure sort of stuff that I guess you'd sort of be expecting to hear when you've got a couple of incinerator guys come along. It's not really going to be talking about policy or anything like that. What I'm really wanting to talk about is that space that's in the middle, which is the space of the entrepreneur. We don't kind of talk about entrepreneurship in waste at all. In fact, never. When you're talking about waste certainly in Perth, we talk about policy or we talk about infrastructure. And, you know, that's all got its place, and I'm not going to say that it's irrelevant, but if you set aside or ignore the role of the entrepreneur, you actually miss a whole heap of opportunities. And really what Garbologie is it's a physical expression of an ideal, which is that we can actually create a world without waste. We can do that through entrepreneurship, we can do that through innovation. And thanks, Brad, for your kind words. We do just a very, very brief plug on what we actually do. We run a mattress recycling plant in Garbologie, and we run what we call a tip shop, which is actually a transfer station in O'Connor. We've only been going for a year, and so we do about 500 to 1,000 mattresses a week, and we get a whole heap of stuff coming through our tip shop. So it's called Tip Shop, which is actually a really bad name, as it turns out. It's actually not a tip shop. It's got a tip shop. It's intended to be a transfer station. So that's very, very briefly what we do. But what I actually want to talk about this idea of entrepreneurship and about how we why it actually matters. And the reason it matters is if you think about food, what we eat, we don't go to the government and say how many bushels of wheat should we grow this week, this year, whatever. What we do is we let the market work it out, and we let entrepreneurs identify where there's opportunities, whether they should be planting wheat, whether they should be planting canola, you know, how it fits in with the cycling of their farms and whatever. And then within that sort of stable growing, we also have a whole heap of niche growers. You know, we have people doing biodynamic growing, we have organic growers, we have all of these other people, and they don't produce into any particular targets. They're producing because they think there's a market, and you know, and that's what the market drives. And it's a kind of a libertarian sort of a thinking. I'm not a libertarian in the US model, which is kind of crazy. But what I do believe that is quite good there is it's actually a very kind of resilient way of building an economy. You know, you're not relying upon one incinerator or 3 landfills. In Perth, there's 4 or 5 landfills. If the 2J road gets blocked, which it has, Perth has actually got a lot of strife in terms of its waste management. Whereas if you build a whole heap of entrepreneurs doing a whole heap of niche recycling, then if one goes down, then it doesn't really matter. They're not doing individually, they're not doing that much. So I talk about the model for Garbologie, which is kind of like the model for the world, is a warp and a weft. So if anyone does weaving, so the warp is kind of like the fixed spreads. That's where you have a whole heap of geographical coverage of sites that collect waste and then distribute it out, having sorted it to their specific recycling destinations, which is the weft. You weave that through, so you have a mattress recycling. In our case, a mattress recycling plant. Now, why does all this matter? Well, it matters because we actually want to do better in what we're doing with waste. And I think the only way we're actually going to do better is if we make decisions from the bottom up rather than from the top down. I don't think that there is obviously a role in making sure we have basic infrastructure. We don't ever run out of landfills. We never have waste piling up on the streets and dysentery and all of that sort of stuff. Obviously, we've got to keep doing that, but we are so far beyond that now in the Western world, and that is really not actually the problem we're facing. The problem we're facing is how we deal with resources. And the way we deal with resources in the market is that we don't dictate what resources need to be produced. We don't ring up Twiggy Forest and say next year I want you to produce this many tonnes of iron ore. You know, they work out what they need to produce for the market, and that's obviously in the big scale. There is a bit of theory around this, and I don't know how I'm going for time over time. All right, cool. So, like, this is not just Adam dreaming this up because I think this is a noble thing to do. This is building on 15 odd years of experience in waste management ultimately as a CEO of a regional council before I left. So it's built on observations of how the waste industry actually works, but it's also built on theory, I guess, which is coming out now around how economies are restructuring. And they're restructuring away from scalable efficiency and they're structuring towards scalable learning. So you see all this stuff that we do in social media, for instance, and we do on the internet. We share learning. We don't, and the companies that do best in this economy are the companies that can pivot. You know, we hear all this stuff, pivoting and doing, and pursuing new opportunities. They're the companies that do best. You don't do that. As kind of what Lee was saying, you don't do that when you've got this large contract that drives what you're doing. Not to say that that's actually not required. You know, there are some things that you have to do. You have to make sure that you're dealing with rigid. You have to make sure you don't have dysentery. However, to build an entire waste system off a whole heap of these large obligations that reduce innovation and reduce flexibility is kind of a crazy way of doing it. That may well be a straw man that I'm putting up there, but what is really important is that we work out how to learn what we're doing on waste, work out how to do small-scale trials, and work out how to do the things that we are trying to do at Garbologie. And you know, whether we're doing them well or not, I guess time will tell. And the market's kind of brutal, isn't it? Like if you're doing badly, then you go broke. So I guess we'll learn that soon enough. The other thing that's really important in terms, so there's that learning thing and scalable learning. There's also what's known, Nicholas Nassim Taleb calls the anti-fragile. So when he talks about the anti-fragile, it's not just resilient, because resilient is a system that just withstands stress, doesn't break. The fragile is obviously something that breaks with stress. The anti-fragile is something that gets stronger through stresses. So, you know, if you think about a waste network of being, a waste system, sorry, being a network of entrepreneurs, a stress in that system might splinter into more entrepreneurs. So you might have, you know, a stress in one part of the system breaks into more resilience around the entire system, more thriving around the entire system. So you actually have a system that is better able to withstand shocks, and in fact does better through shocks. And that's got to be a good thing because, you know, things are changing pretty quick. Granted, you know, we still eat, we still build, we still do all those things, and the tons of waste haven't changed a whole lot, but you know, e-waste essentially didn't exist, what, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Plastic pollution didn't exist, what, 70 years ago, plastic waste. And you know, there will be new things that come up along the way, and new opportunities, and I guess what I try to steer away from is this fear and this thing, we should do something, we need to deal with X million tonnes of waste a year, and I instead say, actually, there are 3.5 million tonnes of opportunity in the waste world. There are, you know, whether that is 3.5 million businesses each doing a tonnage, probably unlikely, but you know, it may well be that there's 100 businesses doing, focusing on a specific segment of the market. And you do see this, you know, you do see mercury recyclers in Melbourne, you do see mattress recyclers feeding product into different, you know, foam back into foam or steel back into, from the springs back into scrap metal. And that's got to be a good thing, yeah? You know, to have all these different people doing different things. Not all like Garbologie, not all Garbologie, although I'd love to take over the world, but maybe not just yet. I guess the last point, kind of a theoretical point, assuming out of time, I've got a minute, beautiful. That kind of I build on when I talk about this thing is that what we have a lot of now is what's called a connection economy. So where we build value not through what we retain but what we share. And so, you know, there's this kind of, and it always sounds really hokey when I say it, but this is serendipity effect. You know, if you create the space for opportunities, then opportunities actually do arise. And that's kind of, as if you want to talk as a system-wide thing, that's got to be a wise thing to do. If you're talking in a business, in Garbologie or in a regional council or whatever, it's always got to be a wise thing to create space for opportunities because you cannot know. Like, you know, the Rumsfeldian epistemology, you know, you don't know what you don't know, yeah? So, you know, why wouldn't you create space for that? Why wouldn't you let systems evolve through learning as it goes? And we do have, and we have precedents in this. We have connection economies. We have, you know, you watch Facebook when it's actually functional and not like descending into bitchiness. That's exactly what it is. It's people sharing things, it's people helping each other. And, you know, why can't we build off that in the real world? And why do we have to hand all of that over to the government or to the major corporations? And I don't think actually we really want to. I don't think we really need to. And maybe it's just because we haven't really thought about it that much. So I'm probably down to 10 seconds now, which is really just a chance for me to wrap up. And just a very, very brief plug. Garbologie obviously does things at the moment that we, in terms of recycling, in terms of creating opportunities. We've actually got an event coming up in October, the end of October, which we're calling the Social Lab, which is a weekend event which is to identify and nurture ideas in waste entrepreneurship, quite explicitly. only waste and only entrepreneurship. Not interested in policy, not interested in lobbying, just looking at that very specific space and creating a pipeline for those to come through to fruition. So we're doing that, we're hosting that together with the School for Social Entrepreneurs in the end of October, sometime. Haven't quite settled on which weekend, but it will be there sometime. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks.